for the 9th of January. Can I just ask somebody online to give me a thumbs up if you can hear us okay? Thank you. We're not expecting a fire drill today, and if the alarm sounds, please follow me through the doors, and we'll meet where the front of the alarm. This meeting will be recorded and then later uploaded to YouTube after the meeting. Any members of the public present should be aware they will be recorded, even if they're not participating in the meeting discussion at the time. If this causes you any particular problems, can you please let me know? Please can you switch your phones to silent for the duration of the meeting? Once we're in the meeting, I will announce the agenda item number, and then the planning officers will introduce the application and any relevant updates and provide a visual presentation to aid better understanding of the content of the application. I will then call on public speakers to present in accordance with our public speaking arrangements. The time for speaking is limited to 3 minutes. Please be aware of that. I will be stopping at 3 minutes. I will then ask the members and officers if they have any points of clarification on points which have been raised by the speakers. I'll then ask them if they have any technical questions for the officers, and then the committee will debate the application, during which members may seek further clarification on points from officers or on points from speakers through me. The officers will respond to those issues and questions raised, and then the committee will take a decision by vote. The first matter is apologies for absence. I have, as soon as I'm aware of, Councillor Jenny Kenton and Councillor Henry Holthouse. Does anyone else have any apologies from members of the committee? No? Okay. The minutes of the previous meeting, and there are no minutes to approve at this time. They will be presented at the ones from the 19th of December will be brought to the next meeting for signature. Before I move on to declarations of interest, I'd just like to invite everyone to stand for a minute's silence. We've had the sad news of the sudden death of Councillor Dean Rubble. Councillor Rubble was lead member for adult social care and a member of the Somerton division, which falls within the purview of this committee, and he was a member of the previous authority for this area, a very well respected member of the council. So could I just ask you to stand for 1 minute? Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Councillor Ware.
Do we need to all, is this, the Ilminster application, is it still owned by the council land? If so, we all therefore need to claim an interest, I suspect. Is that not correct?
When the application was last considered by the district council, obviously the county council was the applicant, no separate body, but the land is now owned by the same body as is determining this application.
So I think yes, we all need to declare an interest in the application. I think we have Is it Dawn Lehman who's supposed to be, speaking?
Yeah.
Dawn, can you please give some clarity to that?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Because it's the council's own application, members would not have an interest in this application. The application can be determined under the 1992 planning regulations. So it's lawful for a committee to determine its own application, so there shouldn't be any issue with interest in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you. So it falls within our powers to determine council applications. It's just the scheme delegation requires that this is done by committee.
Thank you.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Chairman. I took legal advice because I am a member of Ilminster Town Council. And the advice I received from Tony Mears, the assistant monitoring officer, deputy monitoring officer, was that because I was a member of Ilminster Town Council and I sat on the Open Spaces Committee, which is a recommending body of the council, that I should declare an other registrable interest, and therefore I will need to leave the room for the debate and vote. However, as members of the public are entitled to speak at the planning committee, then I can speak as the ward member, but then I should and I will be leaving the room, and I confirm that I would like to exercise my right to speak on this application as the ward member. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other declarations of interest in the agenda? Before we move on to the next item, which is the public questions, we don't actually speak. Public question time, we have no speech. Before we move on to the applications, I was wondering if the member would be willing to act as vice chair for the applications before us. Councillor Patrick, do we have a?
I'd be quite happy to step into the role if we needed to.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Andy. Okay, in that case, can we just have a quick show of hands? Maybe members, are you willing to do Councillor Patrick to be vice chair for this meeting? Thank you, that's one carried. So the first planning application before us is planning application 16055000L. An application for land southwest of Canal Way, Ilminster, Somerset. Rachel, I'm taking this on you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is land south and west of Canal Way in Ilminster. It's an outline application for residential development for up to 400 dwellings with associated access. So all matters are reserved apart from access. The application originally went to committee twice in 2017 under South Somerset District Council. And so first it went to the West Committee and then it went to the Regulation Committee. At the Regulation Committee, it was resolved to grant permission subject to the Section 106. However, since then, the decision was never issued because the phosphates came up. And in the meantime, the developers have been looking at resolving that issue, but have also taken the opportunity to have a fresh look at the scheme and revise it. And that's what we're looking at today. The revisions received in August 2023. And also, as has been said, this is a joint application between council and Persimmon Homes. So first slide here is just the red line boundary of the development. As you can see, it's on the south side of Ilminster. This is Canal Way running along here with a cycle track as well. And then there's the access in this location. You actually can't see my thing there, can you?
Turn those lines on. There's a pointer.
There's a pointer. Okay, yeah, so the access is coming in here and to just give you an idea of this is the doctors in this location, with Canal Way running along here. The next slide is just a slightly wider view of that, just giving its relationship with Ilminster town itself. This is a aerial photo, just giving an idea of what that looks. It's in agricultural use at the moment, in its entirety, apart from the access route, which is partially tarmacked at the moment, giving access to the doctor's surgery. Again, and this is another aerial photo, again showing the relationship with Ilminster town itself. So this slide is the outline, the indicative master plan that's been submitted to support the application. As you can see, there is the access comes off of the roundabout on Canal Way, and then has a series of residential sort of clusters that follows the sort of the field pattern, as it were, and it means that sort of the existing green infrastructure is retained both through the site and on the edges of the site as far as possible. You will see also that particularly on the northern edges of the site, there are attenuation ponds shown to deal with flooding and drainage, which I will also come on to a little bit more at the end of the presentation. You can see the doctors here in terms of the relationship of the site. This site here is also owned by Somerset Council, but there's no proposals to develop that at this point in time. So this plan doesn't come out particularly well on there. So this plan is showing the access and movement perimeters to the development. So essentially, so this dark blue line is showing the main vehicular access into the site. And then there are sort of feeder roads running off a bit into, sort of secondary roads, giving access to residential development. And then off of those will be more minor roads, sort of driveways, cul-de-sacs, etc., giving access to individual dwellings. The dotted lines are public, but either public rights of way or routes for members of the public to use that will be introduced through the site. This route here is a public footpath, and I think that's the only one running across the site. And that, as you can see, that one's being retained. There are a number of pedestrian access points proposed. I should also make it clear that this is all indicative. There's one there. There's one there. There's one there. There. So they're dotted all through the site. So there's a lot of permeability for cycle and pedestrians. In this location here is the emergency site access, and that also includes the pedestrian and cycle access. And then there are two public zebra crossings proposed, one here on Canal Way, and then another one here on the main access route into the site. This next plan is a land use perimeter plan, again indicative, but this just shows that it gives a relationship between what will be residential development and what will be retained as green infrastructure. So it doesn't come out particularly well on this plan, but the sort of the browner, sort of yellowy, mustardy sort of coloured areas, those are the residential development, and then the green is what will be what is intended to be retained as green spaces. And that also includes any of the attenuation ponds running along the north of the site. This plan is a scale and height perimeter plan. So this just shows that the lighter blue areas here, so those are intended to be up to 2 stories in height. Then you've got the slightly darker blue areas. Those are intended to be up to 2.5 stories, and then the darker areas in the middle of the clusters are to be up to 3 stories. So the proposals include a number of sort of recreational stroke play facilities, That includes 2 laps, which are local areas of play, 1 leap, 1 neep, and 1 mugger, which is a multi-use games area. Most of those are well, the neep. I go back, so the main play area is going to be located here in the site, but there is the laps are going to be dotted through the site, and that is where the leap is going to be. So the neep and the mugger are going here, and then the leap there. That's the other plan. There is also so those the laps, the leap, the neep, and the mugger are all being secured through the Section 106 agreement. But there's also indicatively shown proposed a trim trail, community orchards, and also community allotments within the scheme. Those aren't being secured at Section 106 level at this point, but those are anticipated to come forward as part of reserve matters. Sorry for the quality of these were taken off of movies. But these are photos that have been submitted by Councillor Osborne over the last couple of days, just to show the recent flooding of the site. This plan is of the cycle path. That's access from the cycle path into the site. And this one is just a photo of the flooding of the actual site. So with specific regard to the flooding, this is a plan of this is the EA, the Environment Agency surface water flooding maps, and as you can see, so the lighter areas are flood zone 1, I think, and then the darker areas are flood zone 2/3. Is that right? Yeah. So as you can see, there is an identified area on this site that does flood, and that's acknowledged on the EA maps. However, that is known. So the submitted drainage proposals have therefore been designed to take this into account and also allow for an additional 10% buffer above the greenfield rate. The LLFA have been in negotiation with Persimmon throughout the negotiation of the later part, the revisions to this scheme, and that has resulted in some amendments to the surface water attenuation ponds, ensuring that they have extra capacity. And the LLFA are now satisfied with the proposals as they've been submitted and are raising no objections. So overall, whilst it is acknowledged that the site does flood and it has flooded within the last week, the proposals will deal with this flooding, and it will not cause any additional flooding on or adjacent to the site or within the town as a whole. Instead, the proposals are likely to result in an improvement to the existing situation. So just going to some photos of the site. So this photo is of the existing roundabout on Canal Way. That's going to form the main access to the site. There's another just the same roundabout looking in the opposite direction. This is the doctor's surgery access coming off of the roundabout. This access will be realigned, and then the new access will run up alongside the doctor's surgery car park. This is a view of one of the fields from the entranceway. As it says, from the public open space looking towards Herne Hill. It's one of the development fields. I mean, to be fair, when you take a photo of it, it's just fields. There's another photo just looking from Ilminster towards Ilminster from within the site. Another one looking towards the development at Canal Way, which you can see the dwellings in the distance just there. Finally, in terms of the photos, these are just the existing cycle path, some photos of the existing cycle path and the links that already exist between the cycle path into the existing development alongside the site. So in terms of key considerations, covered the first one already, and the second one, and the third, which I've already explained. So the phosphate mitigation solution that's been brought forward includes the temporary fallowing of 110 hectares of land that is also in the ownership of Somerset Council. It's anticipated and is currently drafted into the Section 106 agreement, or will be at least, that within 5 years, a long-term solution potentially comprising the provision of a wetland or purchase of nutrient credits will come forward. That is the preferred solution. The fallowing of the land is only a temporary solution in order to get the development moving. But if a permanent solution does not come forward, then the land will be planted with woodland, and that will form the permanent phosphate mitigation solution for this scheme. It should also be noted that primary school on the adjacent site was originally necessary in order to accommodate the children from the development. However, due to the restructuring of the school system in Ilminster, there is now capacity in existing schools. As a result, a new school is no longer necessary, but there is contributions required as part of the Section 106 in order to create additional spaces for children in existing schools. Finally, an on-site football pitch was also originally proposed. However, this has been removed from the scheme in discussion with Ilminster Town Council because it was on the land running up to Herne Hill, and it would have been quite prominent in views of the site. So we concluded that that would cause landscape harm, and also there was an objection from Sport England that having a football pitch did not take into account the other sports requirements of other types of sport within Ilminster. So in the light of that, the football pitch was removed, and instead contributions are being sought for off-site sports facilities in Ilminster that will be managed in discussion with Ilminster Town Council. And that concludes my presentation, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, it's a good please.
Right. The first speaker I have down to on this is Chris Cullen from Group Ilminster. 3 minutes.
Is this on?
Okay, our comments refer to the proposed fallowing plan. I know people are going to talk about the infrastructure risks. It's difficult for us to comment in detail about the proposal without seeing a report from Natural England or any detailed management plan. And we want to know, does a comprehensive cost of management plan yet exist for the fallowing plan? The Santec report is dated November 23, and if the offsetting is going to be structured through a 106 agreement, we want to know, what work has been done on that so far. Will there be any community involvement in what the content of that plan is going to be? For over 2 years, Green Ilminster has been attempting to negotiate the use of some of the land that's now designated as appropriate for fallowing for development as a community asset, as a community woodland. And that includes, we've made attempts to engage with the strategic asset team. The plan notes that there's already been said that if there's no alternative to fallowing the land, and if that's not found by 2030, then some of this should be changed to woodland. And we're asking, at least for some of this land, why would we wait? It's not just about phosphates. This is also going to be about carbon emissions from all homes that are going to be developed on this site. We note that in Persimmon's value statement, they have an ambition to be zero carbon homes aligned with the climate science. And the climate science, and one of the most effective offsetting, is to plant trees. We don't have to wait till 2030 to do this. They also state that they will positively transform communities directly impacted by their activities. the size of this development would impact the whole of Ilminster. And the whole of Ilminster should be consulted about what those offsetting arrangements are. We had already identified a group of fields behind West Crescent that we were attempting to negotiate the use of for tree planting. And essentially what I'm saying, why would we wait to 2030 to have another discussion about this? It's kind of obvious that carbon offsetting and phosphate can be addressed by tree planting, and a degree of use of this land, it's 110 hectares, setting aside some of this for woodland development as a community resource, as well as addressing the issues that are necessary to mitigate against the emissions from the estate, seems to us just completely level-headed. It might be done anyway. Why wait? That's it, really.
Thank you. And perfectly on time.
I have loved
The next speaker I have listed is David Gordon.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. You have 3 minutes.
Yes. I didn't have this in mind there. Good afternoon, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Gordon. I was county councillor for Ilminster for 12 years, from 93 to 2005, and I was instrumental in getting the cycle path built. And I really just want to make 3 points here. First is that I share many of the criticisms you're going to hear from the other people. I'm not going to talk about them. It's to hear. But I was just, the second point is about cycle path, and the third is on consideration. I was appalled to learn that local members were actually not invited to the discussions between Persimmon and the council officers about this. I was appalled to learn that the cycle path has been dismissed by the applicant's own consultants as not being worthy of any Section 106 funding, etc. I mean, there is net zero by 2030, and they're not even writing, there's all this stuff you've just heard about these rather synthetic imposed playing solutions. The cycle path is the old Taunton to Chard railway, and times change. And in the 1980s, the county council was planning to fill it in with council refuse. So we've moved on a bit, but really it is a resource already. And I'm just amazed, frankly, that Persimmon have missed the trick. And it seems it would be a huge shame if the council misses the trick to work this into the scheme, if you are minded to approve it. Not as a sort of greenwash that makes it approvable, but if you have no option but to approve it, surely this has to be part of the consideration. I don't know how much your hands are tied in the decision. The developer's own assessment is that it was not used enough. Well, I went there yesterday, and the desire paths near the old Donyat Fort are very clear. There are folk here behind me who tell me they use it every day. I met several people in 10-minute stand there using it for walking and cycling on a rather nasty winter's day. It's actually part of the Sustrans coast to coast route. That was the plan. I'm equally being appalled a lot today. I was disappointed that the county highways never took it on as a route, which frankly, for a zero carbon authority or one with aspirations in that direction, I feel should be written into it. Chair, the last point I wanted to make really is that Persimmon 2 years ago made nearly £1 billion profit, according to Construction Industry magazine, £66,000 per home. I think a 6-figure contribution, it's not an ongoing endless contribution, but a 6-figure contribution to a rebound in the cycleway would be appropriate.
Thank you very much. The third speaker I have on this is Henrietta van der Lee.
As always, right. Thank you, Chairman and Council. On the Seven Sussex Council's planning website, in regards to that land planning application, it states 217 total consulted with 101 comments received. Of these, 100 objections and only one supporting. I am one of the objectors for own reasons. Once again, site access road is a problem. There's only one, and it's a shared existing medical facilities. For safety and to prevent congestion, there should be an additional access to that provided to the medical facilities. Emergency access, once again, the emergency access is through the existing estate and across the public right of way. This raises the same arguments as before, as access is via an existing adjacent development, with narrow winding roads not designed for emergency access, and there's on-street parking not wide enough for additional traffic, let alone emergency vehicles. The public right of way is much used for the community, as David just said, and emergency access across it will cause a safety risk to its users. I want to know who would be legally responsible for anything that went wrong as a result of these. Would it be Persimmon, the council? I'm not very sure. Parking is also a problem on all the sites in Elmminster. I don't believe enough has been considered. There may be planning for garages, driveways and parking bays, but there's not enough space for on-street parking. And I'm concerned that there'll be parking on and over pedestrian walkways and cycleways, preventing pedestrians and cyclists to gain access around the site and beyond. In addition, the road routes and cycle and pedestrian routes should be separated from road routes, so they actually connect throughout the development and to provide us with a safe and appealing route and encourage cycling and walking from home to home and all green areas. The various streets you've proposed, the collector, secondary, single-sided access, green street, private drives, do need to be reconsidered. Maybe the road should be wider and there should be the separate cycle and pedestrian routes throughout, so you can go from house to house and across to the surrounding routes as well. And also on the private drive, it says there's no availability of returning for refuse trucks, so where will people put their waste? Also, green communal areas need to be accessed by cycle routes and pedestrian ways and routes as well, which is safe, so they can be actually used. The other thing is net zero carbon home design. We understand Persimmon wishes to achieve 100% reduction in net zero carbon by 2030. One of the speakers have said, why don't you do this now? Straight from the start, don't wait for 10 years to get these in. Implement all the new measures available in the marketplace to achieve that target, with each property having south-facing roofs to support solar capture for photovoltaic systems. Also, it will support owners and occupiers to achieve an optimal whole life value for money from their property, enabling their homes to be run as economically as possible and with minimum maintenance while minimising impact on environmental and climate change.
Before we allow us to a conclusion, you've had your 3 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have Judy Waldy, down to Judith Waldy, another big company.
Chairman, I wish to object to this application on several grounds. First, the scale of this development and the disastrous impact it will have on the infrastructure of Ilminster. The expansion of the town with no supporting structure to sustain a population explosion of approximately 1,000 people. Second, one entrance and exit to the development will ensure chaos at peak travel times. Please note, this is also the access road to the doctor's surgeries, and I would suggest that this is a recipe for accidents to happen. My third objection, which has been mentioned before, is the inadequate emergency access to the development or the proposed development. Fourth, flooding is a high-risk factor, and the proposed solutions to the potential volume of water and subsequent impact on the drainage and sewerage systems are not robust enough. Recent rainfall has highlighted this problem even further, as shown by Councillor Osborne's photographs. I also believe that the phosphate issue has not been adequately addressed. There are a number of other issues which should be considered, such as the lack of employment opportunities in the immediate area, a virtually non-existent public transport system, the impact on the environment, particularly the Herne Hill Nature Reserve, the increase in road traffic and the inability of the current highway system to cope, plus the ditching of the promised upgrade of the stop line way cycle track between Chard and Ilminster. Time prevents me from expanding in more detail as to why this amended planning application should be rejected. But I urge councillors to consign this to the dustbin of history.
Thank you very much. Can I commend the speakers for their adherence? It helps enormously with the running of the meeting to hear all views. With that in mind, our next speaker is Mark Treadman, Clerk to Ilminster Town Council.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. Ilminster Town Council has submitted 4 rejections to this so far. Its points are very well known, and I don't intend going through very many as they're in the documents provided for you. But you are looking at a scheme that will increase the population by approximately 20% on a struggling infrastructure already. Parking is a major concern within Ilminster, but it will be an even bigger problem. Canal Way already is an issue. You're suggesting under this development that there will be, in fact, one entrance for 1.5 cars per house, 600 cars to be accessing. Not a good news. Members are very concerned, as are the general public. There is concern as well that flooding is a major issue in Ilminster. We have been the subject of a Section 19 report earlier this year from a flooding event in 2021. That in itself is a big problem. There is currently a working group comprising environment agencies, Somerset River authorities, Somerset Council, Wessex Water, Ilminster Town Council, and members of Ilminster community, all looking at ways to mitigate flooding. And yet we're looking here possibly at a scheme that will not mitigate, it will increase. One of the issues is that the Environment Agency is currently undertaking a study that is funded by central government funding. 60,000+ has been allocated, but nothing has been done to communicate with them so far. Any scheme of this nature will impact on what is going on. Just if I can very quickly touch upon the Section 106 funding. Play areas, yeah. We've had a number of discussions with members of Somerset Council and officers. Town councillors are against it, but they're not against the 4G or weather pitch service. The proposal was that that pitch was turned 90 degrees so that actually it was on the level area within the planned site, so that then an all-weather pitch could be put in and funded eventually as part of this scheme. So to say that it's been kicked out is wrong. It was something we wanted. It is something the Town Council still wishes to see happening. And it is for all sports, not just for football. Emergency access to the site is severely limited. There is no doubt about it. Adams Meadows is limited. There have been concerns all the way along about parking. There's been concerns all the way along about access. And that cannot and will not go away. It is unbelievable to think that a scheme which is advocating putting vehicles at the back of the houses, but still allowing parking at the front on narrow roadways, human nature being what it is, they will park at the front of their houses because it's the quickest way in. Emergency vehicles then will not be able to get along at that point in time. We have an infrastructure, National Health Service, and it is already under stress and strain. Please do not add to that stress and strain by approving 360 to 400 properties.
Thank you very much. We now have David Knight, who is the chair of Doncaster Parish Council.
Good afternoon. I'm David Light, Chairman of Donyat Parish Council and also Sustrans Ranger for the Ilminster to Charge section of the National Cycleway. Dorset, a village of around 400 people, borders the southern edge of Ilminster. The only thing that separates the two communities at present are fields off Canal Way. Persimmons are proposing to build up to 400 houses on. That's possibly up to an extra 1,000 people. It's 2.5 times the size of Donyat's population on the doorstep, right up against the parish boundary, with no planned buffer zone in between. We feel this is fundamentally wrong. The potential for overspill into our community will be huge. With all these extra people out walking, some with dogs, and their children looking for big open spaces to play and explore and to ride their bikes. The extra pressure on the nature reserve at Herne Hill, just a short walk from the proposed development, will completely change it from the quiet, peaceful place to walk that it had always been. And with no buffer zone in place, all of this extra activity will spill over into local farmers' fields and into our parish. Donyat Parish Council is totally opposed to this development, as we can't see any way these issues can be overcome unless this major change is made to the proposals. I said earlier that I was also the local ranger for Sustrans. I was shocked when I read an update on Somerset Live on 3rd of January with the headline, "Popular Somerset cycle route will not be upgraded if new homes are approved." Judd Consulting Engineers from Plymouth, on behalf of Persimmons, have carried out an active travel survey on the cycleway and had concluded, and I quote, "The route was too underused to warrant the expenditure of upgrading it." This is simply not true. On a fine day, this section of the cycleway will have scores, sometimes hundreds of people using it. Even in wet weather, it is still well used. And not just cyclists, families out walking with their children, often with prams, dog walkers, kiddies learning to ride, horse riders. Yes, it's also a brideway, just think about that. It's also a lifeline for workers as a safe route between Ilminster and Char, avoiding the busy and dangerous A358. Because the cycleway is heavily used, the surface is deteriorating fast. In its current condition, it will not take the extra traffic from the housing development, increasing the likelihood of accidents and injuries. Therefore, I urge you that if this development is approved, upgrading the cycleway is made a condition of planning approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking through your 3 minutes. The next speaker is Councillor Sue Osborne, who's speaking as a division member, and as was explained earlier, she will leave the meeting following this and not take part in the debate. Sue.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'd also like to point out that my fellow division member who was registered to speak, Councillor Balkeech, is actually not here due to having to attend hospital for a medical procedure. So basically, I'm going to be, looks like I'm the only person speaking. So if you would just give me a minute over if I go over to make up, that would be helpful, Chairman. I don't ask very much, but I will in this case. For those that don't know me, I'm Sue Osborne. I'm one of the 2 division members for Ilminster. I also have as well a long association with the County Farms Estate, particularly in Donyat. I was a tenant of the estate up to 2018, and that is the reason why I wasn't involved in the earlier planning decisions, because as a district councillor and with the landlord as the applicant, there was a clear conflict of interest. So leaving that aside, I have already declared as a town councillor. This application does feel rushed, and I wouldn't believe a word the applicant says, because leopards, about the honeyed words that are quoted at the beginning, because leopards don't change their spots. And there is an indication of that through this report and through some of the comments of the speakers. The main things I will concentrate on is the flooding, the cycleway, and the agricultural land issues. And then I also have some asks that I'd like to make of this committee. So here goes. In terms of flooding, 2 years ago, probably 3 now, you will remember that residents in Ilminster were rescued by inshore lifeboat. That is how severe the flooding got. So it is no wonder that people in Ilminster are very concerned about flooding, and no amount of reassurance from the planning officer that a few extra ponds will solve that problem, because the answer is we don't know. And as the residents of Chard know from that Tilia development, the attenuation solution there did not work, it failed. We cannot allow this to happen for Ilminster, we really cannot. The photographs that I've been credited with were not mine, they were sent to me by a resident via a town council colleague who asked that these should be forwarded on so the committee could see those and see the extent of the flooding. And I note that someone has actually commented that the cycleway acts as a conduit for surface water, or it's on the Gov.uk thing. It is a cycleway, not a spillway. There is a world of difference between those two. Moving on to the cycleway, I'm not surprised Persimmon ran a mile. Sustrans wanted 1.8 million, more than the other contributions put together. However, a deal could be done because the new residents will use that. Agricultural land.
Councillor Osborne, you've actually had your 3 minutes. I'm aware that you're speaking on behalf, but please can I ask you to stick to things which are pertinent to your reasons, your planning reasons why this application is difficult.
The other one that is difficult, councillor, is agricultural land development. You have proposed to fallow nearly 300 acres of prime agricultural land. The planning officer's comments are rubbish. That is virtually all farmable. The only bit that isn't is the bit that sits by Coldharder Farm itself and the neighbouring farmhouse. You're taking that out. Was any other option considered when there is an emerging credit market and Persimmon could have easily bought their products on the open market and retain this land for future development? I've been working with Green Ilminster and it is disappointing to see that their proposals for a community woodland, which would have been on part of Greenway Farm, which is due to be fallowed, has been completely disregarded. I would like to see that come back. In terms of my ask, I ask that you do not delegate approval of this application to officers. As you are a joint applicant with Persimmon, it should be coming back to this committee for proper approval by this committee. At the very least, it shouldn't just be left to officers. There should be consultation with both ward members. There should be full engagement with us at the very least and other stakeholders. That should also apply to reserve matters. What's going to happen to the 2.1 site for Ilminster, that for the school, that ought to stay put. Persimmon are being led off very lightly in terms of community contributions. The 106, it seems that the 4G pitch actually seems to have disappeared, and the contributions towards a pitch are far less in this application than they were in previous ones. So I think those do need to be reviewed, and I would like to see that there is now a contribution added towards the upkeep and maintenance of the cycleway, because those future 1,000 residents will be looking to use it, and from the indicative plans, it seems that they will be steered towards using it. There does need to be a contribution there. And it is wrong as well to take so much land out of agricultural production. What right do we have to deny the rights of future generations, our children and our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the ability to feed themselves when we may wind up in a time of real shortage? You can't eat trees, you can't eat fallow, but you can eat food. And without feed, you're dead. You haven't got a society. So thank you for that. But please, if nothing else, do ensure that this comes back to us. If I was sitting on the committee, I would be asking for a deferral.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. I think that might over some time. We could stick with the direct planning passage. You raised a number in there. The next member who wanted to speak is Councillor Adam Dance. I believe you're in the adjacent division.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Can I just A question, councillor Dance is appearing in what capacity? Is
As
he
a member
here?
of the authority.
He's not a ward member, and he's not a resident, why? Is he here as a councillor, or is he here as a member of the public? I don't know.
Any member can register to speak, is registered to speak, but he is actually the adjacent ward member.
Which
Adjacent
member,
division-
sorry?
Adjacent division member. Yeah, the adjoining division.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Martin, but I think it's always nice that as councillors, we have the opportunity to speak at planning meetings. So, I think it's right that, so I do take a bit of umbrage to questioning why I'm here when I want to support residents, but hey ho, let's make a start. So I just have a few points I'd like to say. And these are the points I sort of looked at is, for me, the roundabout that exits is far too small with the increase of traffic. Ilminster population would increase by 20% at least. The doctors and the dentists are at their capacity. And I know this as portfolio holder of public health. I know that the dentists and the doctors here are at their capacity. In South Petherton, even some of our residents are having to go to Ilminster because ours was at capacity, but now Ilminster is at capacity. Can we be reassured that the drainage system will cope? We've seen the sheer volume of water in the last few weeks. I, for one, have seen some areas of my community which have flooded, which have never flooded before. This is also a loss of prime agricultural land, grade 3A land, to be precise. My biggest concern, though, is the lack of funding for the Stop Lyme Way. If we, as a council, and we as a planning committee, want to focus on the green agenda, we must push Persimmon to put extra funding into the Stop Lyme Way. Because to come quite truthfully, if we're going to reach our targets, we need to be doing so. And they should not be left off the hook. We should be pushing, if you are mindful to pass this, they should be pushing to put funding into the Stop Lyme Way. The negative effect on Herne Hill. Also, the following is only a temporary solution. Plus, the emergency exit, in my opinion, we've heard earlier on, is not suitable. Vehicles will have difficulty getting through. And as for only having 1.5 cars per household, there'll be houses here which have more than 2 people living in. There will be an awful lot of increase in traffic. Where I live in South Petherton, there's 4 of us living in the household and there's 6 cars and we have no off-road parking. So that's 6 cars. If we move there, that'd be 6 extra cars. So the traffic movements are going to be a lot more. And this is why we must put extra support into Stop Lyme Way. So I urge you, council, if you are mindful to improve this, but you go back and say you want some money towards the Stop Lyme Way and the cycle way. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me, could I just say to avoid any confusion, the Stop Lyme Way and the National Cycleway are the same thing? For anybody who's not quite sure.
Okay, thank you. I think we take that as read. Fortunately, the committee has many members who are yes. I see that Dawn has got her hand up. Dawn, can you something you want to bring in?
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to make sure, as I'm not actually physically present in the room today, can I make sure that Councillor Sue Osborne has completely vacated the committee room?
Okay.
Thank you.
The final speaker on this application is Simon Coles, who's speaking as agent.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Thanks for the opportunity to address you today. And this scheme would have been well on its way to completion by now, had it not been the delay to the 106 and the phosphates. That said, Persimmon saw the opportunity presented by that delay to completely enhance its landscaping master plan and concept master plan. That brand new master plan had community and placemaking right at the top of the agenda. And it's from what I can see, and I've been doing this a long time, this is a really good master plan. Similar engaged with officers through a planning performance agreement. And they presented the draft master plan to design review and your reports on its response, which is a very, very positive feedback. In terms of planning conditions relating to the master plan, and there's one requiring a design code. And the thing about outline applications is you often see master plans that you approve at outline stage that don't actually turn into reality. Well, there's a design code, planning condition that will ensure that the master plan you see becomes reality. So there's been a range of issues raised today. Phosphates is one of them, the mitigation strategy, the loss of agricultural land. You heard from your officers that the long-term intention is not a permanent allowing strategy or permanent woodland planting. The county council are going to look for a wetland as an alternative strategy that will then support food resilience and retain agricultural employment. Now, there is a backstop, which is following if that wetland can't come forward, but that is very much the intention here. Looking across the other technical areas, the League Local Flood Authority have scrutinised this application to the nth degree. Further information has been submitted, but it's only a strategy. The real details will come at reserve matters stage when hydraulic modelling is undertaken and a very, very detailed assessment is undertaken to demonstrate that a betterment will be achieved compared to what exists at the moment. So that's a betterment. That will address existing surface water flooding and runoff from the development. Okay, and that will again be scrutinised and available for this council to consider. In terms of access, there's no highways objections. The Highway Authority accepts that the point of access and the emergency access are safe and deliverable. And finally, in terms of the issue of services, the officer's report deals with this in some detail because this was an issue back in 2017. The report demonstrates, based on the consultation comments received from people like the NHS, that this application will not create undue impact on existing services. Okay, and that is there in the report for you to consider, members. So, members, look, there is a lot of views on this, and we've heard a great deal. But what it comes down to is there is so much to commend with this application. It's been through the mill. Everybody has considered it in great detail and arrived at a range of no objections. No objections on highways, no objections on flooding, ecology or landscape. They're the kind of key ones, aren't they? So really, what we say to you, members, is we urge you to go with the recommendation before you and to grant conditional approval for this scheme. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to address the various comments which speakers have brought up for this into the question. So I think like matters. Time we can.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I think between myself and John, we'll cover most of them. So in terms of insufficient parking, this is an outline application. The level of parking will be agreed at reserved matters. So that isn't under, although indicative information has been provided, that will be dealt with at reserved matters stage. In terms of the scale and impact on infrastructure, I was just looking that up in terms of the contributions. For this one, there isn't a contribution towards the NHS. So the NHS did make comments on this one in terms of particularly GP surgeries, and they considered that there was enough capacity within the local area, and they didn't seek any contributions on that one. For flooding, I mean, I've explained that already within the the presentation. The LLFA are not raising any objections to this scheme. The Persimmon have amended their scheme to take into account their comments and increase the capacity of the attenuation ponds, etc. Yeah, so that's that one. And what also must be remembered in a lot of these points that have been made is that this site is allocated in the local plan as a direction of growth. So it is, you know, part of the council's sort of directed, you know, for Ilminster, their plans are for this site to be developed. In terms of the access road, I think John might have something extra to say on that, but realistically, this is just about the only access that this site can have. Because if you look at the plans, the northern boundary of the site is bound by the cycle track and also residential developments, cul-de-sacs, etc. So introducing a secondary access into that location would be impractical and probably harmful to highway safety. That's why there's only an emergency access. The highways officers have considered the proposed access off the Canalway roundabout, and they've considered it to be acceptable. And there's no evidence for officers to conclude anything otherwise. With regards to the 4G pitch that was raised, so that was never actually part of the proposals by Persimmon. The pitch that was proposed was a simple grass pitch. And we did look at whether a 4G pitch could be potentially, well, the impact of a 4G pitch, and we came to the conclusion that the harm would still be there, and it still didn't address the objections by Sport England, and as we said, the compromise was reached that contributions would be sought instead, so that would allow investment in all types of sport within Ilminster, not just football, or primarily football. I appreciate 4Gs can be used for other sports as well. With regard to the woodland planting on the fallowing land, I mean that is more of a matter between the council landowner and the interested parties. This proposal does not stop that from coming forward, but what the fallowing land management plan seeks is that the provision of woodland is a worst case scenario. But it in no way prevents that site coming forward for woodland in the meantime, and that would be a matter to discuss with the council if it did get put into woodland, whether it would be a community woodland or not. John, do you want to deal with
Yeah, just thinking about again, some of the stuff that was raised in terms of Doniac, talking about the proximity and scale. Well, this is a site which is identified in our local plan as a direction of travel covering these fields. So we've identified this scale of development in this location as in principle being something that the South Somerset have supported and was part of its development plan. Touching on the NHS, I mean, the point here is between what people perceive to be the quality of service they get and what we can ask for can sometimes differ, because we're only able to ask for built accommodation. We can't ask for staffing, and quite often the problems that GP surgeries will have relate to their ability to staff the surgery, not necessarily the number of rooms that they have within it. I think that may be the disconnect area between people's perception of their ability to see a doctor and actually the building in which that surgery might lie. Looking at the planning land use and stop lines, moving on to those issues. The issue with planning land and how we're delivering phosphate mitigation, actually the solution that Persimmon and the County Farms team have come up with is very similar to ones that we've seen elsewhere, but that's we as officers, because actually a number of these schemes that we're seeing have been brought forward by landowners looking to change farmland or to take farm buildings out of use to create the credit market. Now, none of those require planning permission in their own right, so they're a simple legal agreement to control a land use change which elicits a credit. So when we talk about it will be preferable by a credit, The credit doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from another party having undertaken a land use change project. Now, the issue we have with phosphates is that we have to show there's some certainty at the outset when we make a decision that we have sufficient credit or land use change and that we can deliver that. Now, the easiest way of doing that is fallowing land, because effectively by next year you can guarantee that the land has gone from being farmed to not being farmed, and the amount of phosphates that goes onto it has been reduced by X amount. Everybody accepts that fallowing land is not an efficient use of land in the long term, and all the legal agreements that we have set out that it is, if you like, an interim. It's the short term that allows development to happen. It's not the long term. So each of our agreements says that after 5 years, you must find a permanent solution. Now, what is the permanent solution? The most effective permanent solution is to deliver a wetland, because in land terms, they are highly efficient. So there is some background work that's been done on the Donyat Farm estate, which suggests that we could be looking at 110 hectares of fallow land or woodland, or possibly 3 to 4 hectares of wetland, which is very efficient. The problem with a wetland is it needs to be designed and tested, and actually it has to produce, or rather, Natural England need to see it actually working for a period of time before they'll give it its full accreditation. So it becomes a complex and time-consuming way of delivering the most efficient outcome. And so a number of solutions, including the Somerset West pilot scheme, have gone down a route which has said effectively, step one, deliver fallow land because it's guaranteed, and then we can start to move housing forward. Nobody wants fallow land in perpetuity. So step 3 is effectively, if after 5 years you haven't found an alternative, you'll turn the area into woodland, which at least produces some sort of crop and slightly more efficient land use. But between step 1 and 3, there is scope to explore the delivery of a wetland. And as we said, that the Donyat Farm does straddle a number of streams and rivers which feed into the Parrot network. And there are opportunities, so it's a clear opportunity being identified where a wetland will deliver the ultimate outcome. Now, between years 1 and 5, it's for the applicants and their landowner to develop up wetland schemes and to get them a credit level signed off by Natural England. And that's the same as we're doing on a number of land use change sites, but you probably won't have seen them because they didn't need planning applications. They're simply a land use change mechanism. So in terms of fallowing, I think that the point about food security is a well-rehearsed one. We don't expect to see this level of land going out of use, partly because the incentive is to free up 106 hectares by delivering a wetland to put back into commercial use. But also we have to bear in mind that we were allocated nearly £10 million of DLAP money to deliver further improvements to the nutrient neutrality position in Somerset. Members may be aware that we tested a bolt-on piece of equipment that we stuck at the end of the 5-head sewage treatment works, which delivered efficiencies at about the technically achievable level we're supposed to get to by 2030. So there is opportunity, again, as we move forward, that we can reduce the amount of phosphate impact we need to deliver and mitigate. So the purpose of the Section 106 in relation to the current situation is to ensure that we have certainty and that there is a fallback. But it also builds in the opportunity for the applicant to deliver alternative solutions. It builds in the opportunity for the applicant to buy credits if they prove to be cheaper from another solution. And it builds in, or will build in, the opportunity for the credit level to be reduced if we can deliver nutrient reductions over the next couple of years. And I think if we look back over the last 18 months, I think there's about 18 months ago or less that we've brought 2 schemes to the Committee for Housing in Yeovil, which went to the former Area South Somerset Committee. I think they're the first housing schemes that we've seen in 2.5 years going forward. So we've moved to the point where now we have a range of options. So as I said, the fallow land is simply a marker, and there's then an incentive for the landowners to deliver a better quality alternative. Turning to the cycleway provision, the concern we have here is not the quality of the bid and not the need or the desire to promote alternative modes of transport. It's that Sustrans effectively have lumped the totality of their demand into a project that they are seeking funding for from Persimmon, where this is effectively a strategic project. When the Silver-Regs were introduced, they gave us a tighter definition of what we could negotiate for. Planning gain isn't a sort of a shopping list for nice to haves. It has to be justified based on need. So the only thing that we can ask for is the portion of improvement works that would derive to this particular scheme. Now, the people who've walked the path and were walking the path yesterday, actually I was also somewhere on that path yesterday, confirmed that it's heavily used. In some ways, that's not a great help to the case to seek more money, because what it's saying is that Sustrans are looking at doing maintenance works on this path. But in part, that's because we've got existing residents using that path, not because Persimmon have created an additional need. And what Sustrans haven't done is identify how much new demand would be likely to derive from 400 houses, as opposed to the residue of the route which runs from Bristol to the coast. So in terms of Somerset Council, we're looking, from Langport through Ilminster down to Chard. And yet the only project that Sustrans have asked for funding from is this one. We've got a scheme on Station Road in Ilminster, which was a part-employment public housing scheme where there was no bid. We had no bid in Langport for wider strategic works. We had no bid in Chard for funding towards wider improvements. So we're kind of stuck in a position which, if the Education Authority had come in and said, we need a school site, or we need an enhancement to the existing school, that's one thing. But if they came to us and said, oh, by the way, can the developer also refurbish the school because it's in an appalling condition, we wouldn't be able to go to a developer and say, we want you to pay for that. And that's the problem we've got. Sustrans have asked for everything. We've suggested to Persimmon there is a legitimate proportion which could look to break up their overall bid based on the amount of, the length of track that is immediately adjoining them, so that there is a contribution towards this work. But the problem we have is that Sustrans are kind of at the moment asking Persimmon to resolve all the historic problems of this trackway and all the existing users, when actually all Persimmon need to respond to is what's the additional impact from your residents on top of the existing popular use of this trackway, because Persimmon can't pay for all the other residents who are using the track. So we have suggested to Persimmon that a contribution is legitimate, and we have suggested a figure to them based on trying to break the overall 70-mile trip, or the overall 70-mile route down to what is immediately relevant. But the problem we have is Sustrans bid is out with the Silver-Regs in terms of what they're seeking compared to what Persimmon's impact will be. I think I'll leave it there now, Chairman. I've had long enough.
Could I just ask you to cover, I think there is only, there are only 2 points which were brought up, which you've not commented on, and one of them was the flooding on the cycleway, and the other one was the coalescence with Doniat and Herne Hill.
Okay, I thought I had covered that. The issue with coalescence with Doniat and Herne Hill is the direction of travel in the local plan puts lines on a map suggesting where development will go, and those lines relate to this master plan. So the boundary to the direction of travel chevrons or lines equate to this scheme. So we've established that the expansion of Ilminster will extend to the boundary of this master plan through the local plan. I think the point about whether the cycleway is a spillway or cycleway, I mean, this comes back to the issue which underlies the LLFA, which is they seek to ensure that new schemes or development with its mitigation and attenuation will achieve 10% less flooding than a greenfield site. Now, the public may take the view that surely can't be so, but the issue is that the greenfield site, these greenfield sites slope from Herne Hill down towards the cycleway. So in periods of high rain, the water is likely to flow across those slopes to find the lowest point, which happens to be the cycleway, and then follow that route to another location. That's a consequence of the fact that the land is farmed rather than it's managed to deliver any attenuation. So it's simply a route over which water will find its way to the lowest point. The development of a housing scheme which includes sustainable drainage means that there will be a separation out of water that lands on the road, which will go into drains under the road that feed into attenuation ponds. It could be that water that's coming off domestic roofs is feeding into soakaways or rainwater butts. And as I said, the ponds along the bottom of the site are an attenuation feature which doesn't currently exist. Now, the development doesn't result in any more rain. It just has to manage the same amount of rain on the same amount of land, but introduces areas where it can be stored and held back. So the work that the LNFA do is based on the ultimate scheme having more measures to stop rain reaching its unimpeded lowest common point, because the starting point is to have no control over that rainfall and its movement whatsoever.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, I think that moves us to the questions from members, technical questions from members to the officers. Councillor West.
Yes, it's clarification really. In your summing up slide, you related to education and not the need for the land for the extra school. Hopefully you'll know that secondary education is provided by Wadham School in Crewcombe. And at the moment, we bus a significant amount of children, which I think is in the hundreds, across from Ilminster to Crewcombe. Now, obviously you've made the statement that the education provision for primary education in Ilminster is okay, but can you confirm, especially with the growing housing population in Crewcombe, we've probably got 1,000 more houses coming along, that the education for secondary for Crewkerne and Ilminster is significant with the addition of these houses?
Thank you. So what I said was that the new school wasn't needed. So in the Section 106 agreement, Section 106 agreement is due to secure 36 spaces for early years, which is 762,000, 56 spaces for secondary, which is 1.6 million, 3.68 special needs spaces at 372,000. So in total, approximately 2.7 million is going to be secured through this Section 106 agreement, which will provide spaces in nearby schools in order to create that capacity. So the council has a really competent education officer, and between her and the education department, they do some really complicated calculations. So they assess in terms of that capacity where those children can go, what schools can be expanded in order to take those, in order to create those spaces. But in doing that, they also take into account planned development within the proximity of that school and whatever developments would feed into that school. And they also take into account, things like birth rates and, natural, expansion of pupil numbers, or even lowering of those pupil numbers. So I think you can be confident from that the education department will have taken that all into account, and that those, with the contributions, there shouldn't be any adverse impact on schools.
Are those figures available? So can I have them, please?
So those figures will all be in the education comments that have been received.
Yes, right.
Yes, my understanding here. For flooding implications, if you're saying that most of the rainwater runoff is dealt with by soakaways to do the housing, presumably that's nothing, it's not no relevance to our planning application at the moment, because we don't have details of the housing going in there and the provisions for soakaway there. So do we just wait for reserve that?
The point, it's not quite that simple, it never is. The point is that there is a requirement for the developer to deliver a detailed site plan, which will include a range of opportunities, which will have some localised attenuation, some strategic attenuation, and those attenuation ponds to define or to recognise how much land each pond is having to deal with in terms of the calculations of rainfall and the 10% growth, and also I believe it's the 100-year climate change issues. So we don't have the information to hand. We know that principles are available. They'll come forward as part of the reserve matters. The issue then at the reserve matter stage will be how big is the pond and which of the pipes connecting into which bit of which pond. But the point is there is a mechanism in place, and to say or to have a view that I'm concerned because currently the site floods because it's unmanaged isn't a good reason to say we should refuse the scheme, because there is a mechanism in place. And whatever we think about, the experiences we had last week and, before Christmas driving around Somerset, that is the mechanism that we have available to us, which is that the developer is obliged to produce a solution which has to achieve a betterment over the existing position. And the NLFA's role is not to, roll over. Their role is to say, is it meeting the test that they've got? So, the issue is, yes, trying to sort of reject the scheme in principle on flooding grounds when we've got the NLFA saying there's a solution available and we know that solutions can come forward is a difficult one to sustain.
Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a matter of this fallowing and phosphate. We're told that this is only a temporary or a 5-year solution so that something else can be approved. Will that be part of a condition, that 5-year point, or will that go forward to the next hearing?
The issue is that the Section 106 will say that you can fallow the land for no more than 5 years. And within that period, you have to provide an alternative solution. And if you haven't, you have to plant the land over trees. Now, again, there was some local talk about, we quite like the idea of a woodland scheme, but equally, it's not as productive. It's not productive use. It hits our tree strategy. Where we are is none of these solutions are going to be, none of them are perfect in every way. 18 months ago, we didn't have solutions. Now we've got solutions, and the schemes that I've sort of talked to the committee about before, they require a credit, and you think, I'm just looking at a housing scheme, they require a credit. Well, the credits come from somewhere in the Parrot, and that somewhere in the Parrot is another farm that's gone through this approach and said, well, fallow the land. But the incentive is that the wetland solution requires slightly more upfront design, but gets you 90 to 95% of your land back within 5 years to farm again.
Yeah, so it will be the 5-year option to review will be part of the condition.
It's actually the 106, but it's still the legal control we have over the scheme. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. And then can I have one more, Jim? Am I right? I mean, having sat through this a number of times, I think you and me, Mike, were the old originals. This is part of the direction of growth on the local plan we've heard. Am I right in thinking that the Ilminster plan, which it hasn't quite reached fruition, it is also shown as part of the direction of growth for Ilminster, this land?
The neighbourhood plan does acknowledge that this is the development site in Ilminster, which I think it does because it would have views about where else might have been coming forward. So it did identify this as being the site, and it did identify some options in terms of connectivity through the site.
And if I may, Chair, on that point, this, of course, was all a very heated appeal, I believe, if I remember correctly, on which direction the direction of growth went with another site in Ilminster, which was ruled out. Am I right by an inspector?
There was another site in Ilminster, and it did go to appeal and it was rejected. And I think, again, in the neighbourhood plan, it does discuss the alternative options, and I think the neighbourhood plan comes down in favour of this as it's preferred.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jerry.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a question about the single entrance. I heard the rationale that across the northern boundary that you're coming in from a lot of cul-de-sacs, but I noticed that there's an area that isn't part of the development, it's also owned by county, but actually you could put a second entrance into. I'm wondering whether that area has been deliberately missed off so that we can't put an entrance through there. It does seem to be a a natural place a little bit further up the road from the roundabout. And I would also say the rationale about crossing the cycle track, well, the roundabout, I believe the cycle track goes across there anyway, so it would be a case of just doing simple engineering as it's been done on the roundabout. I'd just like an answer as to, has that been considered and what the rationale is behind that particular bit of land not being included?
The rationale for that bit of land is that, as Councillor Best was talking about, until the 3-to-2 tier education structure changed in Ilminster, that was always identified as being the primary or first, the other primary or first school site. So it was kept out of the land that was released for development, because it was always thought that would be of itself a school site that would then feed back into the access road to the Persimmon scheme. Whilst education have resolved I think they don't need a site. It's of such a recent occurrence that it's out with this scheme. So obviously this scheme has been through the Highway Authority in sort of 2016, 2017, and again on this recent consultation, who said that they are happy with that arrangement. So I think you're right. If you were starting a master plan with a clean piece of paper, you could look at other options, but ultimately you will be filtering traffic onto the same road, 40 metres, 50 metres apart, rather than, actually distributing it to a different part of the network.
Thank you. Councillor Kendall.
Thank you, Chair. Some very good answers there. I've learned a lot of them was taken on. I've got two simple ones left though. Before your pen started working, you were talking about the cycle routes in the plan. Do you mean that you were showing your pedestrians on your pen, but it wasn't working, then your pen worked, you were not pleased? Can you just show us again the actual cycle route of the plan?
Okay.
Do apologise. there's
No,
not-
it's okay. Let me,
One more question after that, Chair.
right, so, let me break up again a moment. Find the right plan. So what
You have one with movement plan.
yeah, so I've got one with the movement plan, that one there. So, this shows the sort of, so that as is, just to present it again, so the main bit, so in terms of these applications, what you would have is a hierarchy in terms of particularly vehicle movements. So the top sort of road, the main road through the first, through the development is this darker blue line. And then you've got secondary roads feeding off, and then those will feed off into cul-de-sacs and driveways, etc., etc. In terms of pedestrian and cycle paths, these are mostly, these are the dotted lines that you can see running through the site. So that provides permeability and the ability for people to access different parts of the site on a, almost a dedicated route. Because if you also look at these aren't following roads. These are paths through open space, etc. So they are separate from, and then of course there will also be, pavements along the roads, etc. Alongside that. If you go back to the master plan, you can probably just about see, these brown lines running through the development, and those are also the indicative sort of pedestrian and cycle routes, so that again, those are separate from the roads. So in terms of infrastructure for non-car, non-car use, this scheme is actually quite good.
I mentioned like that, yes, I agree. Sorry. My last question is, it's quite funny. You was describing the contours and 2 stories, to understand what they're like. 3 stories, I understand that. But what the hell is a 2.5-story building?
So 2.5 is basically loft conversion. You see what I mean? So it would be a story and then rooms in the roof with dormer windows.
Right. I understand.
Yeah, Councillor Wood.
Just a bit of clarification on the cycle route. It actually, the Suntrack cycle route is actually a tarmac route which runs round the north, like that. And it actually runs round the top of the site and then goes all the way through to Chard. And if you're lucky enough, it will get to Dorset eventually. And so it is a national route. and that's for tourists. It hasn't anything to do with the paths that go through the site, am I
No.
right there?
You are right, yeah, the route runs along the top of the site along here, and that's a dedicated cycle route. And I think it goes down there and then it goes onto roads, I think.
Yeah, it does.
It does.
It doesn't, let's go to the panel. Okay, councillor Best?
Yeah, just back to the road again, at the entrance, which is one of the things that is my deepest concern. We've talked about congestion and all the traffic going one way, but if that road for any reason had to be closed, would the emergency route take all the traffic, including inbound lorries and everything?
Clearly, for the purposes of emergency, yes, but the amount of lorry traffic that will be going to a residential site once it's been constructed is likely to be, more down to the refuse vehicle. And clearly, because it's an emergency, there will be an incentive on the Highways Authority to provide a speedy resolution to their to closure.
I'm not. Knowing some of the road closures we've had, and we've got some at the moment, it's protracted. My thing is that you are isolating all those houses within that area if that single road is closed. So I'm really surprised that we haven't got it to the
Well, although it's generally true, I point out that I can recall several complete road closures in the area around roundabouts where lorries have been turned on their side, and how long it took to clear them, which wasn't that long.
But did those houses have another accident?
No, they tolerated the accident for an hour or two because they get the road clear. Councillor Webb?
Thank you, getting me back in on the road thing. Has there been any suggestion or any regulation changes to actual Canal Way? Because anyone who knows this route, it's coming in from my side, Chard, it's the only way to get into Elminster. It's a narrow road. There's always vehicles parked there. It is totally unsuitable for any more traffic. I just wondered if part of this plan was to do anything about the regulation for parking and other conditions on Canal Way itself.
So, no, that is not part of the proposal. So Highways will have taken that into account in terms of the wider infrastructure. And how cars not only, get in and out of that site, but also the highway network that feeds into it and whether that can cope with the capacity required for this development site. So there are no TROs or anything like that in the proposal. And just on the emergency access, just going back to that point, of course, as Councillor Stevens said, in the likelihood of the main access route being closed would be in an emergency, and council would be unlikely to rock up and just close the road on a planned maintenance or something like that without providing alternative access. And were the site to be, the access roads to be closed in an emergency situation, there is the secondary access that will allow emergency vehicles to get in and out of the site were a secondary emergency to happen within the development. So there is still that secondary access, but it's just for emergencies.
All the traffic go through that.
Councillor Kirby?
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back to the entrance, in Somerton, we've got a trading estate that with the flooding was cut off. We do have emergency access, which I had to open to allow people in and out. I had to remain open for about 24 hours to allow the water to abate. So it's not a simple case of it may be a vehicle that's overturned on the roundabout. You may well have something to do with the infrastructure that closes that road for 24 hours. If that were to be the case, could that emergency access cope with that level of traffic? Thank you. That's fine.
Well, clearly the Highways Authority believe it can, and the issue you've got to bear in mind is that the test of the NPPF is that the harms are severe, not just awkward, not just frustrating, that they're severe. And that's the issue, that yes, we will all be in a position where you're queuing for longer than you want to be, but it is not a long-term solution. And I think, the issue in terms of said planned maintenance will be if there is a proposal for planned maintenance on that access road, it will have to work on the basis that it's traffic lights rather than closure, because there is no alternative. So, those are the measures that are in place. But I appreciate every development leads to more traffic. We experience more traffic with, compared to where we were 10 years, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But I think the emergency access, given the severe test in the NPPF, is probably where the Highways Authority are coming from, that it's not perfect, but it's not harming, it's not breaching that severe test.
Okay, do we have any more questions?
One more, sorry, Chair. Thank you. It's in relation to the cycle track, and there was some hint, I think, from the planning officer that there could be some negotiation in relation to the section of track which abuts this site, shall we say, and maintenance of that, or which is well indeed of. Is that something we can condition, or is it just something for negotiation?
It's a section 106 negotiation. My view is that the figure of starting point from Sustrans is just wide of the mark. My feeling, I've tried to sort of quantify it in my own mind, that they've got a 70-mile route and about 2 miles are relevant to this site. So if you broke it down and said it's a planned maintenance programme, I would be looking at something like a 35th of the bid. My take is also that actually this is the kind of project that's better dealt with by SIL, because SIL is supposed to be looking at big strategic projects. What we've tried to do is go to one landowner and said, you have to join the worst part of our problem. So my take was, if we went for, at its most simplistic, 2/70ths of the overall impact, we've got a figure that we could put towards this scheme. Absent any figures from Sustrans on actual numbers, it's difficult to go any further.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we've finished the questions part, so I think move on to the debate. Who wants to lead it off? Councillor Kendall.
My name of it.
I volunteer.
My name. It was.
Patrick here, reporting usually. To start the debate off, having heard all the evidence and not said anything, but just sat here and thought about it, I'm minded to support this application. Just to kick things off. Yes, okay. So. The best. And book. And the web.
Well, for the sake of, not just for the sake of talking now, but as I said earlier, I have now been through this application. I think this is the third occasion. Mike and I have done it. It was a very close call first time, but here we are where we are. And the fact is, of course, the question I asked, it is within the direction of growth, the local plan. It is, has been approved by the regulation committee of, not in its current form, but in a different form, by the regular South Somerset District Council. And what we haven't heard today, which I'm very surprised at, is the 5-year housing supply matter. And obviously, this would go to that as well. And I have severe reservations about the flooding issue. I have severe reservations about the access, but I think on the balance of planning matters which we've got to consider, I'm afraid I will consider supporting the application as it is. Thank you.
I would reiterate what my fellow councillors said. Some very good points.
Councillor James.
Sorry, I don't feel I'm able to support this application. I'm looking at it from an aspect of my moral compass. I'm really uncomfortable with flood risk and the knowledge of what's happening in that area. I've recently had, a few residents from, the other side of, Ilminster, so the other side of the playing field. The parking issues around there, it's a mess. It's a mess. I don't know how you're going to change that. So for me, I'm just looking at it from a metaphoric label, so the tragedy of the commons, just destroying its value altogether, the growth of overpopulation, the habitable destruction. Okay, I can cope that. There's not an awful lot there. The water crisis that it's going to create. And when we're looking at joining with the neighbouring thing, this is Ilminster, an identity, say with Darniac, it's not Dorminster, you know, but I just think it's too big, and I just can't support it. I'm sorry.
That's okay, will you?
One of my questions have been answered. It's all been, very good by answers today.
Okay, well, I'm going to move the officer's recommendation from the chair. Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Do you have anyone who wishes to propose an amendment or? Okay, in which case we'll put it straight to the vote. Those in favour of the recommendation in the officer's report, please show. Those against? No abstentions. Thank you very much. That's clearly carried. Can I ask the planning team to make sure that particularly ward members are kept appraised of developments of the design framework for the reserve matters, which is a condition. I would like to see local involvement, and in particular, I think we'd all like to see heavy emphasis on sustainable transport and energy efficiency within the site. And perhaps some of the concerns that people can be well-led and resolved as possible. Thank you very much. I'm going to propose that we take a short 10-minute recess and reconvene at 5:40. So, President Notice. Sure. Then restart. Planning team ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
You happy?
Sort of, yeah. I just need.
The next item on the agenda is 196 Sherborne Road, yeah, Somerset. Debbie, I think you've got this one.
Yeah, we're just getting the PowerPoint up on the screen for you. Right, thank you, Chairman of the Committee. Yes, this is an application in Sherborne Road in Yeovil for change of use of an existing residential property to an HMO, housing multiple occupation. This shows you the application site outlined in red in this existing terrace of residential properties. Bit of a wider setting of that on Sherborne Road. And that's with the junction with the road to the right hand side of the screen then. The aerial photograph of the site, and in particular, you may want to notice this is the property referred to at the bottom, Beaumont House, where there is this access to the rear of the property. And that's a private access that doesn't have any official right of way, but you might see here that many of the properties along this terrace do have rear access and parking areas, but that's not got a definite legal right of access to the property. That shows the wider area. And this shows the layout of the existing property, which you see is a typical terrace property with the 4 bedrooms on the upper floors as existing. And you'll notice that on the first floor, these do have existing en suites already in place. And the proposal is that it be a house of multiple occupation. The upper floors are unchanged. On the ground floor, there's the 2 new en suites introduced to provide 2 bedrooms on the ground floor, and this rear wing of the property will provide the shared living and dining and kitchen space. This shows the, not very well, the layout of the site, but what this is showing is this is, if you could make out the line of the actual property, that's the dormer, I think, that dark shaded area. But what you have got is at the rear of the property there would be a bin store, and at the rear of the plot itself, you'll see some photographs of changing levels. There's a building at the rear that does have provision of the cycle store, and this is where that parking space is as existing with the access along the car park of Beaumont House that I referred to. There is an existing parking space there, it is used at the moment, but could not be relied upon for the purpose of this planning application. This shows you the front elevation of the property on Sherborne Road. This is the rear. This is the access way towards the site. The actual application site has got this white van on it at the moment, so that shows there is a parking space, but it does demonstrate that there are other properties with parking along to the rear. And that is the edge of the garage block that belongs to Beaumont House. And that's the rear of the application site. You see there, this is at a raised level, that the rear access, and that's the white van that we saw earlier. And that's the steps going down, and actually that's the rear, and that's the bit we were talking about, where the bin store will go. These are the key considerations of the planning application. There is an Article 4 direction that covers this part of it, and I'll show you the plan of that in a sec. That does mean that what would normally be permitted development is restricted, and that the need for a planning application is made required by the Article 4 direction. There is some concerns been raised about parking standards and the residential amenity on the surrounding area. I just want to highlight in that paragraph about the Article 4 direction, there is a bit of a typo error. Sorry, I'll take responsibility for that. The properties referred to are 187, 189 Sherborne Road, not 188 as was typed, and the residents and occupants numbers for those are 10 and 12 occupants, not 10 and 14. Those are taken from the licensed HMOs on the council register. I'll come on to that. I'm just going to show you, this plan shows the area of the Article 4 direction. This map shows the licensed HMOs taken from the council register in the surrounding area. The red star is the application site and the blue are those licensed HMOs. And in addition to the conditions in the report and recommendation, it is suggested that this additional condition be added, which would limit the number of occupants to 6 persons. Other than that, that's my conclusion, and the report recommendation as in your agenda with that additional condition. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have no speakers. We have Councillor Locke, who's the division member, who would like to speak.
So thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank the officer for a report. This area is, as you know, yourself, is very familiar to myself. I've lived in the area for many, many years and represented that area. I note the objections of the town council: inadequate parking in service area, unsuitable access and unacceptable traffic generation. That is no change from how it is now. The only change we've got to this application is 1 person extra, I believe, and the planning officer will confirm that if I am wrong, moving into the house, which means it needs to have the Article 4, the HMO license. Now, having the HMO license means that the house has to be brought up to an acceptable standard, living standard, which has to be maintained for the tenants who would live in the property. And previously, there's just, I believe, been homeless people, persons in there. Now, I mean, reference has been made to the community and the amenity of the community. These houses do lend themselves, if they're managed correctly, to HMOs, a house of multiple occupancy. The parking policy states that it is within the walking distance of the town centre, so parking does not come into it. There is 1 space there at this moment in time. I would just like to point out to the committee that we have had applications further east than those shown on the map there, which has come in and been rejected on parking and have gone to appeal and has been overturned because the inspector said it's within walking distance on a bus route of the town centre. I'm saying this is going to regularise accommodation for tenants who are probably less fortunate than some of us, and means that it has to be kept at an acceptable standard, and it would be to no detriment of the people who rent in there are ways and means where things can be reported to be addressed. That's all I would say. I would hope the committee would support this application. I think the officer did the report as well as could be expected under the circumstances, and if it would be rejected and went to appeal, I would support the officer's recommendation at that appeal. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much. We have no registered speaker by the applicant. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Best.
Just for a bit of clarification, you showed the proposed bin store, which was at the back. How do the bins get to the front? Is there a side there that goes? Sorry. It's the bin store up. I think it was the drop bit at the back. The bins collected from the front, and is there a side alleyway that they go from front to back?
Could I help there, Chairman?
Yeah, sorry.
Things were collected, the refuge lorry turns up into where Beaumont flats are. They're not stacked out on the pavement outside, which is on the main thoroughfare in the middle.
So that's in the rear. So they've got to get them up the steps to the whatever.
Yeah, that would be as existing with existing road.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
As existing.
Any other questions? Councillor Kendall.
Thank you, Chair. It's the planning officer again. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on the cycle store and the current car parking? If the cycle store is going to be in there, which I believe, but there's an application is, that's going to be in that parking area, in the main parking area.
The cycle store is provided underneath the, that parking area. It's the change in levels is such that it's underneath, and there is a condition to, require the provision of cycle parking for six.
We're just going to pause for 30 seconds while the technology is sorted.
I think we've finished with questions. I brought this to committee principally because we haven't put an article 4 directive on an area for the town to monitor and manage, and it will obviously eventually be a judgment call as to whether this is adequate. So I think it's time to make another step in that judgment call. I propose the author's recommendation. Yeah. Councillor Ashton seconding. Yes, Kelly.
Yeah, I was particularly pleased with the officer's recommendation at the maximum of 6 people, so can we just make sure that that is also included?
Extra condition, yeah,
Okay, so with that extra condition, can I see all of those who are in favour? And that's being unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to the last item of the agenda, Ilford Farm Hilton. No one is registered to speak for this, so could we please have the presentation from planning?
Thank you, Chairman. Just wait for my colleague to get my presentation up.
Yes, I could read to it. I think.
You could have stayed.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for a extension to a residential curtilage and for the extension of alteration to an existing dwelling to provide a multi-generational dwelling house. So it's not an annex, it's providing a sort of single unit accommodation for multi-generational living. The application is before you because the applicant is a member of the council. The scheme of delegation otherwise wouldn't have required it to come to committee. So the application site is here. We have some photographs which I will show you in a minute. It's a mix of dwelling, outbuilding, and you can see on the plan that there are some areas that the map identifies as green, which means it suggests they're not guaranteed to be residential curtilage. They could be paddock or orchard or other land. So the area, the proposal is residential curtilage. However, part of our case in the submission is that actually within this location, there are no uniform boundary lines to properties and no obvious arrangements or characteristics that would say a small extension to a residential curtilage here is unacceptable because there's a range of residential curtilage sizes and there's no established field pattern that says this looks like an arbitrary intrusion. So we don't have concern with the inclusion of some agricultural land within the residential curtilage. In terms of the property itself, as I said, you can see some outbuildings, that sort of range of uses. It doesn't look necessarily like sort of virgin green field. And in terms of the application site itself, you can see here the access, some of the outbuildings and dwelling behind the outbuildings. So an existing dwelling, and then the proposal is for this linked extension. And within that, so that's the existing dwelling, and you've got this linked extension, which has this sort of form that suggests a connection into another outbuilding in terms of the design approach that's adopted. So there are a range of outbuilding structures, but none of them dominate the host property. They're all subservient. They all tend to theme as if they are outbuildings or linked structures. So they tend to respect the scale of the host property. They sit within a sort of defined port area, but they provide the opportunity for single living accommodation. The parish did raise some issues historically about flooding, but they've not been supported. Or they've raised sites previously on this location on flooding, but haven't raised it in relation to this particular application. So we have recommended the application to you for approval. It's a photograph of the host property. You can see it's already got some outbuildings appended to it. And again, a relatively generous curtilage. So as I said, Chairman, there are none of the normal triggers for this to be before you in terms of parish objection or neighbour objections or departures from policy. Therefore, we've recommended approval.
Thank you very much. Do we have questions?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I think I've just realised who this is, and the applicant's husband is a friend of mine, and I didn't realise that this was his. And him and I have performed on many occasions in pantomime, which is not. Which is nothing to do with this current hearing, of course. But I think I have to declare a personal interest and not vote on this one.
I see Dawn Lehman's put her hand up again. Dawn?
Yes, sorry, councillor, because you have a close association, you do have a other registrable interest, and you could possibly be considered predetermined. So I would suggest that you actually leave the room and do not stay, debate and vote on this application.
I was going to say, go home.
Thank you for that. I will leave the room and I'll see you next meeting then. No, I'll come back, Chair.
You've got to leave, just waiting to leave the room before moving forward.
Yeah.
Same
With that retirement stage. Do we have any questions? Okay, comments? Councillor Bandridge.
Councillor Best today.
Please remember my name this time.
Yes.
I have no comments to make.
Thank you, Chair. I think that this is a very straightforward application. I think the fact that it's only here because of the Oxford involvement, I would be quite happy to recommend approval. Chair.
I'll second that.
No, I was going to, I would have seconded had, Mike not.
You can third it.
That's it. That's it. No, I would agree. It's a straightforward application and we all know the reason why it's here.
Councillor Ashton? So, good turn. Councillor Jones, Councillor Kennan?
Happy again, yeah.
I think you summed it up very well, Councillor Curley. This is a relatively straightforward matter that is here on a technicality. So I'll move the answer's recommendation from the chair to the seconder.
We've already done it.
Sorry, Vic. It's late in the day.
Yeah. Likely the amount.
In which case, I'll put the proposal to committee. Can I have all those in favour, please? That's kind of unanimously. Thank you very much. There are appeal decisions within your papers, which are for committee only. Thank you very much for your attendance. With that, we'll close the meeting and the next meeting is in form. We should. I believe we're expecting the Martok application back.
Jen, yes, the LFA couldn't make today's meeting, but they can make the 30th.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.